What's up, guys? It's Stamp. So I had promised you all an update to the skill tree system, and with the new lake, the new river coming out, and quite a few changes overall to some of the skills and a bunch of different hot fixes over the last couple months, and all the additional new content, new lures. It's time to kind of make a new video. So what I'm going to do is go left to right and kind of talk through. Primarily, the target audience for this is going to be level 20 to level 30. And at level 30, you may end up resetting a select few of these, and maybe even earlier than that, depending on what you're looking to do. But we're going to go kind of left to right. Even if you're a new player, I think this will help you kind of get an idea on what you can spend points on and what you shouldn't bother with. So we'll go ahead and get started. So we're going to talk briefly about float fishing, and float fishing still is at the point where I do not feel it's worth investing points in. Initially, until you get your skill reset, if you're going to put something in there, I'd say maybe early in the game, you could be worthwhile to put some points in using a rig with the fixed line when you're first getting started. But I really don't feel float fishing is worthwhile yet. I really don't. This is the only thing I can see between the waggler and the baitfish float rig putting points into. But you do get additional XP by using float fishing, but the trade-off versus having to fish that way, having to time the hook set, I really don't feel there's a lot of value in putting points in here currently where the game sits. Now this is as of October 2018, so there could be changes to float fishing, but I still don't think it's anywhere near where it needs to be in order to put points into. So we're going to go ahead and skip this whole tree. If I was to give you a recommendation on what you'd want to put anything in, rig with a fixed line, slider rig, and I would assume baitfish would be solid here. I've heard it's pretty good from the guys I've asked who have this unlocked, which is very few of them. I've heard this is decent, and the waggler, I have seen some people have some success on Bear Lake with carp with the waggler. But again, it's just not at the point where we need to even discuss it, in my opinion. I don't think float fishing is worth investing anything in. All right, so then we're going to go to spin fishing. So spin fishing has had quite a few changes to the skill tree in the last few months. As far as meta, I guess would be concerned, Wacky Rig has become super popular over the last 6 weeks, probably, with the ultralight leaderboards now being in play and a lot more guys using ultralight tackle. So ignore my tree and how it sits right now, because I'd make some changes to it as of now. So as we look at this, I don't think fishing with spinning rod is really that important unless you truthfully want to focus on spinning being your number one thing. For me, it's not. It's always supplemental to, I don't want to say always, but it's primarily supplemental to feeder fishing. Or maybe I just want to go out and throw a jig because I just don't want to sit with feeder rods for 20 or 30 minutes at a time, or maybe go throw a spoon. But from the last video I made, there's some changes I would make. So spinning rod is something, if it's going to be your primary, I can absolutely see investing in this. Spinners are absolutely atrocious. I think they're the worst thing in the game to try and fish with, in my opinion. They're boring. They suck. Nothing else to say about that. I just really don't think these are very good at all. I think they need buffed or just completely changed from the way that they work. I don't know if anyone even fishes Balea anymore, even though it's brand new, because it seems that it's so hard to catch anything that's worthwhile, no matter what you use. But I think spinners are one of the things you're supposed to use for them, but it's so bad that it's not worth even speaking about. So we're going to move on from spinners and not talk about them much. Unfortunately, when you first start, spinners are what you have to work with. So until you get to spoons, it's a pretty slow, miserable climb, because I think spinners are pretty bad. Now, as new lakes come out and new rivers, maybe they'll become more worthwhile, but it's really tough to validate putting any points into spinners. Spoons is the number one thing I think that everybody utilizes currently. Between spoons and jigs, these are still absolutely worth putting 3 points into for your spinning. When it comes to casting rod, same thing with spinning rod. If spinning and casting is going to be your primary method of how you're going to fish, I can see that being worthwhile, but I don't know that it's worth a complete 7 points. That would be up to you and the way that you're going to fish. I primarily use jigs with a spinning rod, and I primarily use lures with a casting rod. That's how I do it. That's up to you guys, depending on where you feel you're going to spend most of your time. Because I don't know, I don't know that it's worth putting points in there, because you're not really. I mean, you could get a big kuori char, you could get a big salmon, you could get some. Currently in the game right now, there aren't huge fish like they are that you need to fight in. Let's take a look at the bottom fishing tree, where you need to put points into your feeder rod or carp rods. You absolutely need that because you're fighting fish that are 50 kilogram. I don't know that that's the case with spin fishing as much, so that's my stance on that. Spinning reel and bait casting reel, not really worthwhile, because casting distance, in my opinion, still is not that important. I don't think it's that valuable, so skip this. Wobbler I would avoid currently. I think Wobbler has been nerfed into oblivion. I have not had hardly any success on Wobbler in the last 2 months, and I can't justify putting points in Wobbler. This is definitely something I'd drop. Three-way rig, never have found a way to have any sort of success with it. Ignore it. Low profile reel, same thing with bait casting reel. The low profile reel, if you're going to fish a wacky rig and fish ultralight, I can see that maybe being worthwhile to you, because casting distance is important, because you can't throw your baits very far with ultralight. So that may be something you'd want to consider. It'd be the very bottom of my list, though. Casting distance to me is not important at all. Drop shop rig, same thing with three-way rig. I really have not met anybody who's managed to get this to work that well yet, and it's definitely not meta from what I've seen. So ignore drop shot rig. Topwater, same thing. A lot of people haven't had a ton of success with it. I do catch some pike and perch occasionally on kuori with them when I feel like working them, but I don't think it's that good yet. Wacky rig is something I can see you may want to put points in. I'm not going to tell you it's a definite like I will with Texas rig, because I think Texas rig is one that I definitely put points into. Wacky rig, I don't know that that's as much, but wacky rig's definitely in the last, I'd probably say 6 to 10 weeks, has come on much stronger, with a lot more people using ultralight tackle and then throwing wacky rigs. So if you enjoy ultralight, I'd say it's definitely worth consideration. Now, as we go through the rest of these, you can see I don't have this stuff. Heavy bait caster, jerk bait. I've heard that jerk baits are not very good. They're not where they should be, considering it takes so long to unlock them. You get them at 90%. I've heard they're not where they need to be. Carolina rig, I also hear, is not as productive as the Texas rig, but that could also be because so few people have it unlocked that maybe that's the reason why. So we'll kind of stop the spin fishing tree right there. So to recap, spoon absolutely, jigging more than likely you at least want 2 points into here. Texas rig I'd say is an absolutely, and wacky rig would be considerational. Wobbler I really don't think is where it needs to be right now. It's not how it used to be, where you could drag funky minnows and pick up a lot of different fish, catch a ton of pike on them. It's just not that way anymore. So wobbler I'm going to say is a skip. As we get into bottom fishing, this is one again that I think will change a little bit from where we were previously. So as you get into the 20s, there are now a lot more options for carp rods. So you may be able to skip feeder rod and go straight to carp rod. That's something definitely worth considering based off the cost of the carp rods and where they are now. There's a lot more options than where there were previous. So this is something I would probably reset at this point once I buy my carp rod. But I don't have one yet. They're super expensive for my level. You know, they're somewhere between 9 and probably 11,000 silver. So that's something I haven't changed to yet, but I will longer term. So early on in the game, as we look throughout the tree, it's going to change. Simple bottom rig's definitely worth putting some points into because it takes you a while till you get up to the rigs that are really worth it, I think simple bottom rig, loop rig, and method feeder rig are all worthwhile. So a couple changes would be get rid of this baitfish bottom rig. Baitfish has been terrible for the last 2 to 3 months. I don't know what happened to it. I have caught some fish on baitfish in Ladoga, pike on perch primarily, but outside of that, it has been atrocious. I mean, I typically wait 45 minutes to an hour to get bites on a baitfish rig, and I fish it probably more than any other rig. And I will tell you that it is the least productive of any other rig that is there right now. Now, previously, it wasn't like that. Something's changed. I don't know what's changed, but it's not nearly as good as what it was. So, with that, just to kind of recap, because I don't want to go through this the whole way. You don't really need to. There hasn't been a ton of changes. So, early on, simple bottom rig's good. I think simple bottom rig is the best presentation to use in Kuori. Fishing with a feeder rod is definitely worthwhile. Paternoster, I would say, would be a skip. And inline rig, I think, is also a skip. Hold off until you can get to loop rig, which you're going to use in most of the rivers primarily. And from there, method feeder you'll use in most of the lakes, especially Bear Lake. I think that's the best rig for Bear Lake for me from a production standpoint. Even if I don't have ground bait in it, it doesn't seem to matter. It's still pretty good. And skip bait fish. Spod rods, rocket feeders, I really think these are still pretty much useless. PVA sticks are worthwhile in taking, according to Crossy, who's had these unlocked for a while. He really likes them. I don't foresee myself using this, but he does say it's worthwhile, and he fishes more carp than I do. I just can't see spending the money to make that much ground bait to lower my margin on fish that I'm catching already. I mean, I do a good enough job of that myself by traveling too much. So again, as we look back through here, a couple changes. The main one would be ignore bait fish bottom rig. When you get there, it's not that good, so keep that into consideration. And then carp rod over feeder rod longer term. So getting out of bottom fishing, we'll go into bait harvesting. So bait harvesting is a struggle, and it's a ridiculous struggle. It takes far too long to get to where I am. I mean, I'm at 91%, guys, and I cut up every fish that's not a check mark that's over 500 grams. So I've probably cut up 1,500 pieces of fish, and I mean, to give you an idea, I've given away countless numbers of worms, and I still sit on 20,000. So I've dug up 20,000 worms, plus I've probably dug up 30 to 40,000. I don't even know what the number would be. And with that, I'm still not at 100. I mean, we're not even close, truthfully. Now, happy hour has made it a little bit easier to level some of the things. If you save your bait fish until that time and you cut them all up in happy hour, you might get a point. If you spend all day fishing just for creating bait fish, you may get a point or two, maybe, in happy hour. But it is so slow that if you're thinking you're going to do this in 6 months, don't even put any points into it, because I'm now over. I've been playing since the game was in Russian, and I don't have as many hours as some of those other guys, but I feel I've probably worked on bait harvesting more than most that are around my level, and I'm not even close to being at 100%. It feels so far away right now at 90% when I dig for maybe an hour to 2 hours and I still don't get a point, and you cut up 15 or 20 fish pieces and you don't get a point and you're still failing. It's really frustrating. So long story short, I guess what I would say is really don't put points in this a priority. You're not going to grind through it. You're not going to push through and by having points in it, you're probably going to be more successful, and it's going to be a little bit faster. But once you get to mayfly larvae and night crawlers, I mean, you still don't dig them up that fast. And mayfly larvae is probably the one you want. You'll use that a lot. I mean, you'll use that a lot. But mayfly larvae, leeches are pretty much useless. Dung beetles are useless. Cockchafer larvae I mean, I've gotten some brim on them, but again, not very good. Mole cricket's not very good. Water beetles, I don't know anybody that's used one. Rhino beetle larvae are supposed to be good, but lately there's so much bycatch on rhino beetle larvae. It's not like it was. Crayfish tail and mussel meat, I don't catch a lot of fish on these right now. Not anything to speak of, at least. So I don't know that putting points in here is as valuable as what I thought it once was. I don't know if there's been changes to it, but what I can tell you is leeches still don't work that well like I would think they would. And anything down through here, rhino beetle larvae is what you want, but that's 100%. It's going to take you so long that there's no reason to focus on it. What's worthwhile in this tree? Redworms is good to get because you're constantly using them. Making the potato cubes, definitely worthwhile. Potatoes and cheese are worthwhile. Bloodworms, not really. You can buy those, they're not too much. Fish pieces is definitely worthwhile to catch some burbot on Kuori. And mayfly larva is pretty good. It's not as good as what it once was. Frogs aren't that good. Honeydew, not that good. The bait fish, we've already talked about that, not that good. So as you look towards the tree, this is something I'd probably push you guys away from. I mean, it's just not where it needs to be, in my opinion. Again, same thing like we're talking about bait fish. That's what a lot of this tree is. So getting to bait fish, you think it's going to be great and awesome, and then you put all this money into it, and you're like, man, I'm not catching anything on this. This kind of sucks. So all that being said, I would personally stay away from bait harvesting currently unless you feel you're going to really push towards 100 and spend hours every day digging. So anyway, off of bait harvesting. Cooking. So cooking's the new skill. Give you an idea, I spent about 1,500 to 2,000 silver, and it put me where you see me right now. I'm at salmon steaks. So I think possibly potato moonshine is where you want to be. But again, climbing through this is going to be miserable. Salmon are hard to catch as it is. The ravioli, crayfish, and caviar, I don't even know how you get caviar. My assumption is you have to catch sturgeon, maybe sterlet, and then use that higher end fillet knife to cut it up, which is a lot. I mean, it's just a ton of money. So at 1,500, it put me right around salmon. And cool thing is, I didn't have to put any skill points into it. But also, as you look at the expense when you get around 50, this is like 10 silver an attempt. Pike, again, not that easy to find. Russian pancakes are probably between 8 and 12 silver an attempt. The smoked fish, most of those are harder to find. Salmon steaks, again, not an easy fish to catch all the time. So then you get into crayfish. Good God, you're lucky if you get a crayfish in a day. Caviar, how often do you catch sturgeon? So this is another one that's going to be a pretty stupid hard climb as you get into the top part of this skill tree. So I haven't really pushed any now that I've gotten to salmon steaks, and I'll just go slowly. The fact that I spent 1,500 to get there really surprised me because I was sitting on a ton of potatoes, a ton of tea and coffee that I hadn't made. So this one's going to be really slow. Good thing is you don't have to use any skill points for it, but just be prepared that you're not going to spend 500 silver and get into the 80s. It just doesn't work. Now, what I will tell you is I did some of mine outside of peak time, but keep in mind with this and with ground bait, with making lures, do it in your happy hour if you have premium. It really saves you a lot of time and money. So moving on. So making ground bait. So I currently don't have any points in ground bait. I still feel it's not worthwhile to invest points into it. If you are going to grind it, I would say you definitely should put points into it if you really want the skills. It's a pretty big financial investment, but it's not as big as what it was because now you have happy hour, and you can probably get to 60 to 80% in, I would think, 1 to 3 happy hours, depending on how much stuff you have prepared and if you're ready to go. Now, Crossy would completely disagree with me, and you guys know I think the world of Crossy's opinions. but he likes to fish for carp way more than I do. I don't enjoy fishing for carp in the game. I'm so sick and tired of carp. I've had enough of it, but he enjoys it. So I would say if you really like fishing for carp, it's probably worth it. If you don't, probably not. And that's going to be my stance there. So PVA sticks is something that I see him use a lot. He does catch a lot of big fish, but I truthfully don't think that it makes that big of a difference if you have ground bait or if you don't, and it's a silver sink. Every time you're using ground bait to catch fish, you're essentially throwing more silver at it. So that being said, I'm not going to invest points in this. That's up to you guys. And then you have lure making. So even though I'm at 0%, I wanted to go through here and talk through a couple things that I think are probably worth getting. So ignore pretty much the entire bottom half of this tree. I've thrown those baits all the time, and I really don't seem to have a lot of success with them. Hendrix was nice enough to send me a bunch of baits initially, and Fred sent me a bunch of stuff that I've tried. And the bottom half I don't think is very good. Now, again, most of these are wobblers and cranks, and I don't think they're working how they should be right now. So if we look at the top half, foam rubber fish is like the meta of jigs. So maybe it's worthwhile to get yourself to 10% just to do foam rubber fish. Again, do it in happy hour. Save yourself money if you can. Looking through the rest of these, no. Yes, this one would be worthwhile. And then as I go through the rest of the tree, I say no, they're probably not worth it. But Xander Spoon, there's times I can't catch anything on any of the hunter spoons, but Xander Spoon produces. So this is good to have one of these in your box. And the foam rubber fish, it's good to have an assortment of these. I wouldn't say you need to get to 55 to get to a Xander Spoon. Just ask somebody to make one for you. Send them the mats. They probably would. But the foam rubber fish, it's probably worth getting to 10% if you wanted to. That would be really the main thing on here. Again, you can probably just send it to your friends and have them make it. So with all of that, that's the recap of the skill tree and where we are. So hopefully this helps you guys. If you're newer players, if you're not, if you are, come stop by my stream or Crossy's stream. He's super informative. I'll throw that link in the description below. And come hang out on the Discord if you have any questions or you don't want to know where the fish are biting. We'll be happy to tell you guys. So thank you all very much for watching. I will see you guys in the next video. Thanks for your patience on this. It took forever to get you an update. So thanks again. See you later.